We always do it through a social justice lens. So let's get started. On today's show, we're going to talk about something called period poverty. What, might you ask, is period poverty? Let me start with the basics. About half of the world's population menstruates. This includes women, girls, transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people. And menstruation supplies are not free. Not tampons, not sanitary napkins, not period cups. Not only are period supplies not free, but they're actually quite expensive. The average amount of money a person spends on menstruation supplies is about $13.25 a month. And in a lifetime, almost $7,000. Because of this, it's estimated that about 1 in 4 of those who menstruate struggle to be able to buy period supplies. That, my friends, is the definition of period poverty. I hear some statistics from a study that was done last year that speaks to this problem. About 4 out of 10 of those surveyed said that they had struggled at some point in their lives to be able to afford period products. 38% of those who identified as low income reported that they have skipped school or missed work because they didn't have period supplies. And when you break it down by race, there are also some disparities. 23% of Black people and 24% of Latinas said that they had struggled in 2021 to afford period supplies. That's compared to about 8% of white respondents. When it comes to our state, we see some disturbing statistics as well. In Connecticut, 1 out of 10 menstruators between the ages of 12 and 44 live below the federal poverty line. So they suffer from period poverty. COVID-19 made things only even worse, with an estimated 65% of those who struggled financially during the pandemic saying that they could not afford period supplies. Period poverty, in a nutshell, affects people's lives in really negative ways. When students can't afford to buy period supplies, they sometimes skip school. And when adults can't pay for the products they need, they sometimes skip work. Talking about period poverty is something that folks have generally avoided talking about. It's been taboo for a long time. It can be embarrassing for people to talk about it, and it can also be downright humiliating. But thankfully, that is changing, and there's now a growing movement of activists from all over the world who are working to try to fix this problem. With me in the studio today is one of those people. I want you to welcome my guest today. Her name is Catherine Jones. She is known to us as the beloved CJ. CJ is a fierce local advocate who wears many hats, and she is known as an activist on racial justice issues, social justice issues, and immigrant rights issues, and now gender justice issues. CJ also heads up a racial justice and social justice group known as Black and Brown United in Action, which is New Haven based. And she's one of the leaders in Connecticut who is fighting against period poverty. CJ, welcome to the show. So good to see you.
Hi, so nice to see you. How are you doing?
Good. Talk to us a little bit about how you got involved in issues related to period poverty.
Great, thank you. So thank you for that awesome intro, first of all. So glad to be here. My interest, of course, I have had to meet those struggles on a personal level, and now in my cap as the program coordinator here at the Diaper Bank, we took on coordinating this collective of pursuing menstrual equity to improve access and affordability of period supplies in various areas. We were really focusing on the jails, the shelters, and the schools. Based on those statistics that you just provided, as you pointed out, you never know who's facing period poverty. It could be the teacher, it could be the cleaner, the restaurant employee, the classmate, How about the incarcerated, the detained, the homeless, the sex workers? Who talks to them about these things? So, the Diaper Bank's BEAM program is the Connecticut's chapter for the Alliance of Period Supplies. And since launching in 2020, has provided over 190,000 free period products to over 4,000 individuals across the state. That's big, you know. And so our move right now is to really address the stigma that isn't spoken of, as you pointed out. Where do we get to talk about this? We have, as you also pointed out, which is very true, we have young women, including my own child, who today, ironically, had to be absent because her cramps were so bad. You know, as much as we have women present in the workforce and in the schools in different capacities, where is our accommodations just to be? The woman, the transgender, the non-binary, non-gender conforming, where can we just be? The statistics are what they are. The numbers speak for themselves. At the beginning of the COVID pandemic, 2.3 million women left the labor force, with the Black woman being unemployed at a rate at 17%. And these are for various reasons. I mean, these are our main caregivers, and their basic need is just not being met. So for me, being part of the diaper bank, this was something I had to be part of. Absolutely. And not just to talk about period supplies and just the poverty, but how can we do this in a way where we can be good to ourselves, and have these conversations. Let's start talking about our fears when it comes to using different things. In terms of Black and Brown United, I'm happy to say that our sister Unidad Latina en Acción has been providing this basic essential need to the community, and it's very telling because it's not until you start to go into that space you realize how much is not really said about it. Why do we feel like we have to wear big pads? We don't have to. Maybe we should have conversations about how often we take breaks for these needs, or maybe we need to revisit the narrative. So there's so many things to be said here in those two words, period, poverty.
So talk to us, CJ, about what you are seeing and observing in your advocacy efforts that are specific to New Haven and Connecticut. I know this is a global problem, but I'm curious to know, as you do this advocacy, what are observations? You started making some observations about immigrant women. You started making observations about women of color. But tell us what Connecticut and New Haven or a local picture of period poverty looks like.
So the local picture of period poverty could look anything like students using notebook paper, rags, whatever they could find, bleeding out and not saying anything, or even just being absent from school because their cramps are so bad. As far as the adults, it's just to have the uncomfortable conversation. So the diaper bank last year launched a project called Humans with Periods, which Joy Wren, a student from Wilton, led, and she spoke and she started sharing stories about periods, just talking about your periods. And since then, it has really grown. And some of these stories are very interesting and heartbreaking too. Stories of domestic workers not being able to take a break or believing that they have to use these big long pads because they don't have sufficient breaks. Restaurant employees talking about, well, I can't use a menstrual cup. How am I supposed to do that? I would love to help the environment, but I can't. Or how about students who are saying, when I don't have sufficient, or when my pad or tampon is soaked, who do I go to? Who can I go to? And then we know that there's a growing number in terms of, the shelter use, domestic violence, and emergency shelters. Where are these needs being met? Everybody from the providers within the community to those most impacted are saying, how can our needs be met? Who cares about this need? That has been the general thing, and because it's such an unspoken topic, once you start to go into it, it gets very interesting. As you pointed out, on average, you could spend anywhere, and that's pretty low considering, right? And how much you would get for $13. How long would that last you? What if my period goes on longer? Should I go to the doctor? What about the mental wellness side of having a period, your mental exhaustion? Those conversations have been coming up. The stories are endless, but the need is definitely there. We should not have college students running around from site to site trying to find a tampon or a pad. You know, um, Students should not have to, a high school student shouldn't have to be worried that they didn't have pads with them. Are we even talking about these things? And in talking to the students, they're very excited and wanting to learn different ways, right? Very environmentally focused. So we're actually having these conversations about menstrual cups and reusable pads as well, because it's not just limited to one thing. And also other things that we don't talk about, like when should I really be concerned about my flow? Should I be worried? Are there things I should be looking at? Because we don't talk about these things. And the most daunting thing I think was the fact that for the schools in particular, 9-year-olds are having periods now. Where is that conversation being held? Are the parents having it? Are there opportunities in the school? Are these needs being met there? So for us, it's very important, to build that narrative and to encourage other folks to have this conversation that otherwise isn't being had.
Even public schools are sanitary supplies, period supplies made available in bathrooms. Do you know?
So some are and some aren't. It sounds like from the research we gathered, the data we gathered rather, it's very limited in general, because I did ask my own, within my own little network, if they do see these things, and most times the answer is no. You might see like an old machine sitting there with a tampon dispenser, but it's empty. You might see like the little dispenser, the trash dispenser for the pads there, but you won't necessarily see a spot where you could just push a button and get one. And then the question becomes, well, who do they go to? Like, what are these students using? And that gets scary because there are students using notebook paper. If they're afraid or they don't know who to go to, some may call out of school, some may use notebook paper. And then why? And this is another discussion that most likely, if not, it hasn't started, will start. Why aren't we allowing excuse absences for period cramps? you know I imagine myself, there are days when I'm like, woof, this is a lot happening here. But how is this accommodated for, especially at a time where truancy is a big deal with the New Haven public schools? Are we really going to hold it against these persons for having to call out because their cramps were that bad
Yeah,
you know
the issue also of stigma and being
yes,
embarrassed to call in. If you call in to avoid an unexcused absence, telling the
well, that's the word,
person who
right?
answers the phone, I have my period and I have period cramps. It's easier
Yes,
for us to do so because we're women with experience, but for young girls, I
right.
can imagine that that's really young girls and young people with their periods. I can imagine that that's really embarrassing.
It is embarrassing. And then what do you do if it's worse than normal? Like, how do you have this conversation with a parent or a caregiver? And this is not limited to the younger ones, but even college students. In my own personal research, I found out that, myself included, once I had a period that was so heavy, I went to the emergency room. But what happens when you get there? What sort of reaction do we get? So the words are access, respect, and affordability. These are basic, essential needs. There's no reason why it should not be funded, more so available, especially to our Black and Brown and, those who are not privileged to have these within reach.
So you talked about the diaper bank launching these efforts first with humans of
With
what's it?
periods.
Humans with
Humans with periods
periods.
here. Yes.
So I have two questions. One is, how does our listening audience access the humans with periods? Do they go to the diaper bank website, or is there a
Absolutely.
specific website?
Yes, you go right onto the Diaper Bank website, and we have a link to our advocacy, and you'll see more information about this project, the Menstrual Equity Project. There is a bill number because, you know,
Oh, there. I
yeah,
was going to say, you started off with humans with periods,
yes,
and now you've moved into the Connecticut
yes,
legislature, and you've been working on efforts to pass a bill. I believe there's a bill number now. I think it starts
yes.
with 5952,
It's
if
5272,
5272. So talk to us a
HB
little bit about
5272. Yep.
Talk to us a little bit about this bill and the legislative efforts that you are involved with, you and the Diaper Bank.
So right now, the concept was introduced by Representative Kate Farrar through the Public Health Committee. So we literally got the bill number yesterday, I think like morning sometime. And so the purpose of this bill is to increase access to menstrual products in public schools, state colleges, state university, community colleges, prisons, jails, and shelters, right? So what does the bill include? A quick overview. Menstrual products be provided at no cost to individuals who menstruate who are attending public schools K through 12, housed in prisons and jails, housed in emergency shelters, attended state colleges, state universities, and community colleges. And we also, on our website, we have more information about the bill, and we also have a toolkit, and we're encouraging folks to testify. We even have information on how to write the testimony, who to call. Reach out to your alder. Don't just limit it to your state rep. Reach out to your alder. Reach out to your state rep, and say, hey, what about this thing? Reach out to your senators. Say, we need this right now, you know?
You're listening to Kica's Corner on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio, broadcast at 103.5 FM and live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. CJ, how many sponsors are there on this bill, and how would it work? How would between the language of the bill and implementation, what might that look like?
The implementation. So the language on the bill and to the implementation. So now we have, are you meaning in terms of legislative sponsors or just in general?
So first of all, whether you have legislative sponsors, and then what might this bill look like if it is passed? In terms of implementation.
Great. So legislative sponsors, we have, I want to say it's 4 and growing because that's where we're at. Since we got the bill number, I'm happy and proud to say Senator Gary Winfield is signing on this bill. Yes, he is. And so is Robin Porter, as far as I know.
Beautiful. New Haven showing up.
New Haven shows up. That's right. In terms of implementation, we are meeting with the schools. We had the executive director of the Diaper Bank met with the schools to discuss, what would that look like in terms of how many dispensaries, those conversations are being had because it's important to know, and we have it sparsed out in different segments where we have different persons involved handling those pieces. So we know that we are working with the schools, the jails, and the community colleges and universities to get the access and the shelters as well. So that number is continually growing. It is continually growing because as the news, develops, more are getting involved, more are wanting to say, okay, yes, we're going to do this. And actually they're saying, well, maybe we should have more than one section of the building to have this. So it's really, really great. So the implementation piece, once the bill is passed, we'll go right into the implementation piece, which will mean that we'll have these set up within the various institutions.
That's terrific. When is has there a hearing been scheduled yet?
So a few minutes ago, I was actually chatting with our ED about that, and we're waiting to hear. It'll either be next Monday or next Wednesday, and I'm happy to say that in conversation with Representative Farrar and other vested legislators, I found it necessary for there to be an accommodation for those who do not speak English as their first language.
Beautiful.
So yes, so we are, once we know how many non-English speakers are testifying, we're able to let them know. And so what we're looking to do is either have added time for their testimony in case they have a translator with them. And for me, you know me, I want the top tier. Why not have the government supply a translator? Come on now. We could do it, right? So wouldn't that be wonderful? You show up to testify and somebody's there to translate for you. That takes the layer of stress off. So I'm very happy to say that Rep. Farrar sees that vision. And, we've been working closely with QUALF to help develop these toolkits. So there are various toolkits that are being, shared in English and Spanish. And that to me is so important because representation matters. Mm-hmm. It really, really does. And coming into this month especially, I just wanted to note, this is our month to shine and let's do it. Let's do it together.
Which are the organizations, in addition to the diaper bank, that are supporting these efforts?
In terms of this legislation,
Yes.
community partner wise, we have various community partners throughout the state of Connecticut who have and continue to distribute the period supplies. Unidad Latina being one of them. We also have Reliant Behavioral Health, Christian Community Action, um, Iris is another, and the number is growing. Again, as folks join on and they're finding out, you know what, you're right, we don't talk about this. So that number is ever increasing. Of our close to 100 partners, I would say about over a third are on board with assisting in advocating and supporting this move for sure.
You're listening to Kica's Corner on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio, broadcast at 103.5 FM and live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. CJ, are there any models somewhere in the world that you think that we should be replicating?
In terms of addressing period poverty, well, in
Yes.
America, we could look at what's happening right now in California because California pursued their own model of ending period poverty. Across the world, we could look at what's happening in countries such as Africa and India, where they're actually building businesses, supporting the business and the lifestyle of the renewable products and reusable products. So, for example, in those countries, they created businesses which creates employment and helps with the economic flow, where you have various persons assisting in making, reusable pads, right? And in doing so, creating a whole menstrual kit that you could give someone and it's reusable. So you don't have to worry about buying it every month. You reuse it each month and, you feel secure and you feel good in your being. So across the world, we just need to realize the narrative, the conversation's never going to be, there's no good time to have the conversation. It's just to have it. And as you have it more and more, you know, um, you realize you'll get even better and better at recognizing and feeling empowered, right? And that's the key part, just feeling empowered. Because this is something, Black and brown women, our uteruses are the least valued in the world. And so this is something that's very near and dear to my heart to know that this is something that plagues us. We work these long hours. I was reading yesterday, being February 28th, back in 1909 was the famous strike where we had the garment workers who had the uprising of the 20K. Many of them were teenage girls who worked 12-hour days. And I was thinking about that. And I was like, can you imagine having your period and having to work that long?
Mhm.
Right. And how can we make it better? And also, how can we re educate ourselves on how to handle ourselves during our menstrual cycle, which again is something that has been coming up. How do we properly use things like menstrual cups and reusable pads and make it comfortable? And
Yeah.
you know what? Say it's okay not to be okay. And it's going to have times when we don't know the answers, but let's find it together.
And talk to me briefly about the California model. How does California look different now? Uh,
How does it look different now? Well, it is
yes.
improving, it's continually improving access, it's continually making room for more access to these supplies by ensuring that they have not only the product, but the budget for it, right? And really pushing that point about the affordability piece because clearly if it was affordable there wouldn't be the need there. So with California, their strategy was to say, you know what, let's work it into these budgets and make it more budget friendly, and by advocate via your budget to show that, you know what, when you do this, this is the need that you are addressing and this is the outcome of it. You're going to see different things improve. You're going to see student interest build in the movement. You're going to see that the truancy levels might not look as bad as you think. It could just be that they are missing or absent because they're going through this time, right? And also the need, right? Not just in the schools but also in the lesser spoken, the jails, the shelters. The need
So
is there.
so just to clarify, in California now, as a result of um, policy,
Mm-hmm.
are we seeing accessibility in schools and jails and prisons
Absolutely.
and colleges and
Absolutely.
universities?
Absolutely. We're seeing it improve and increase. And
Okay.
as the access improves, right? And increase. And when I say by improve, I mean like To start off with, it may have one dispenser in the entire building for everyone to use. Well, as time goes on and the need is more evident, it's going to increase the availability and thereby improve the access to these products by having more than one station. And you know what? For example, right here at the diaper bank, things happen like not having the gender on the bathroom door. So, like right here, we have period products in all bathrooms, regardless of gender. It's there. So, things like that also happening in California and continuing to grow. California really set that tone of it is something that can happen. The state can afford it. We just have to ensure that we recognize and we meet that need and understand it's a basic essential need if anything else.
Mm-hmm. CJ, unfortunately, we are coming to the end of the show, so
Yes.
it's now my time to get personal. Are you ready for your questions?
Oh boy.
First one. As a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Really?
Yes.
Oh wow, this is interesting. I had two things, right? And remember I was a child, so just dreaming away. Daytime, I was gonna be a ballerina, believe it or not. And at nighttime, I was gonna be an artiste. I really used to love to do stippling and painting.
Huh.
I know.
That's great. If you had to describe yourself using 3 words, what would they be?
Oh boy, describe myself with 3. This is very interesting. Curious, blunt, curious, blunt, and what's another one? I would say outspoken. Yes.
And the last one, if they made a movie of your life, what what would it be about, and which actor would you want to play you?
Oh boy, that's great. That's awesome. See, now you're gonna make me really, really think. They made a movie about my life, and who would I like to play that role? Oh
And
boy,
what would the movie be about?
So it would definitely be about my story migrating from Trinidad and Tobago to the United States, and along the lines of how my life and my activism were actually aligned. But I didn't realize that until I would come across on a fateful day meeting certain persons and being part of a great movement that just made me say, what? These people existed this entire time. Where were they? And in that note, meeting someone who is a great mentor and friend, actually a couple of them, few of them, particularly Mr. John Jairo Lugo, Miss Kica Matos, and Miss Barbara Fair, and how they will frame me and, inspire me to be some, that person that I didn't know exactly was sitting there, but she was there, if that makes sense. In terms of the actress or actor, I'd have to get back to you on that one because then I'd have to research. That'd be the 4th word if we had a 4th word.
All right, well, we'll have you back on the show then. Folks, we've come to the end of the show. Please, if you can, get active in efforts to end period poverty in Connecticut. Go to the Diaper Bank website and find ways that you can get involved, testify, send letters to your legislators. Please get involved. This matters to all of us. Thank you, CJ, for joining us today.
Thank you.
I never give a shout out to the fabulous producer, Harry Droz. So Harry, thank you always, always, always for working so hard to produce this show and to be so supportive and so intentional about striving for excellence. To all of those listening, please do something for the cause of justice this month, even if it's just focusing on period poverty. And until the next one, here is wishing you less cold and many, many more days of sunshine. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Ibaratile yigere bi jedu la menti be fola